All right, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our application tips webinar, where we show you all the tips and tricks as you navigate your application for our Simon programs. So thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Trista Kukuchka. I'm Director of MS Admissions here at Simon Business School. I've been with Simon for about 9 years now. And I've worked with MS students this entire time that I've been here. So really excited to chat with you today, and hopefully you'll all walk away with a lot of great knowledge as you navigate the application process. And I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in today. My name is Daniela Laniz Guerrero, and I serve as Assistant Director of MBA Admissions with a specific focus on our full-time MBA program. So excited to chat with you all about application tips and kind of go through this process together.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Daniela. And so before we sort of take a deep dive into each piece of the application, I just wanted to do a quick overview of all of the application items you can expect as you work through our application. So our application is entirely online. You'll submit all of the different components that you see here via our application portal. And so you can see the link right there by the first check mark in terms of how to access and begin your application. And then in terms of what components, what additional information will you need to be able to provide as part of your application, we're going to be looking for your resume, which outlines your work history. We will also need school issued transcripts for each institution you attended. And again, we'll talk more about all of this in detail. But you'll also need to complete 2 of our required essays. We do not require letters of recommendation, but we do require contact information for 2 references. If you are an international applicant, we do require a language score, and that can be the TOEFL, IELTS, or Duolingo English test. The video essay is part of the application process, and that looks a little different for our MS versus MBA candidates. So we'll talk again more about that a little bit later. And then the application fee, which is $90, but there are a couple of ways that you could get yourself a fee waiver for that if that's something that you are interested in. And then we are an institution that is test optional. So you can choose to submit the GMAT or GRE as well. MBA applicants do have the option to submit the executive assessment test score exam as well. So we'll take a deep dive into all of the pieces of the application process, but wanted to give you a little overview of everything that you will need in order to submit a completed application right from the start. And so in terms of submitting your application, or beginning your application rather, this is what the homepage kind of looks like once you log in to begin your application. And so you can see the left navigation there will allow you to sort of jump through section to section, the different pieces of the application. What's really nice about our online application process is that it allows you to log in several times to continue working on your application. So once you start an application, it doesn't mean that you have to submit it right then and there, same day as you start working on it. You actually have plenty of opportunities to begin your application, work through a little of it, come back, make edits, upload new pieces of the application. So you can continue to work on your application over several sessions. So again, that left navigation will help you to work through different components of your application. And then additionally, the entire online application is very, very user-friendly. So not only do you have the ability to continue logging in and out and working on your application over several days or even weeks, we also provide very detailed instructions on each section of the application. So if you're ever curious or worried or think you don't have all the information you need to start working through your application, there are, of course, plenty of resources available on our website. I always like to say the FAQ section on our website is incredibly helpful, as is this, hopefully, this webinar as well. But the application itself provides you with so much detail as you work through it. And so go ahead and start working through your application, and you might find that some of your answers are actually right here in the application portal itself. And so with that, I will turn it over to Daniela to talk a little bit about work experience.
Yeah, thank you, Trista. So in regards to tips related to work experience, we break it down into two different sections within the work experience, generally speaking, and then your resume as well. First, within that work experience, we note that there's a difference between our specialized masters and our MBA students. Typically, our MBA candidates have a few more years of work experience and our specialized master's individuals typically have, less than 2 years, average 2 years of work experience, and typically come out of undergrad as well. We take a look at for your resume, your full-time work experience, part-time, and internships. And it's really critical and important if you are applying directly out of college or university that you include that internship experience that can highlight the quantity and quality of your work, since sometimes you might not have that full-time work experience yet. We take a look at the relevance of your degree in alignment with your career pathway up to date, the nature of your responsibilities, the teamwork that you've developed, and leadership capacity and skill set, which is something that you will work on here at Simon Business School as well. But it is useful for us to know what experiences you've had previously that can help allude to some of those components when you come to grad school. Within that resume, one page is preferred. No more than two, especially for specialized master's candidates. So definitely just have preferred one page. Listing accomplishment style. So we also take a look at your background, your work experience, activities and interests that can help allude to some of the things that you've done previously. It is a primary component of our application, and it will be used to evaluate your candidacy holistically and conduct your interview. So it's important that you know everything that is on your resume and be prepared to discuss some of the components that are on your resume as well. Now moving on to the second component, which is our transcripts. The expectation is that you scan and upload a school-issued transcript for each of the colleges or universities you attended. This includes undergrad, graduate, and any summer course as well. It's really important for us to be able to track that. This can be uploaded directly into your application, and we don't accept transcripts any other way. So it's really easy, simple to upload. Um, there's a screen grab there that you can see, and it's under academic history. You can type in your university and it pops up and include that submission on there. The admissions committee typically assesses the rigor of the institution that you attended, what major you chose, degree obtained. We take a look at your GPA, but then also look closely into the different quantitative course work that you've taken previously. We have a myriad of different students coming into Simon with different backgrounds, so you don't have to have a specific degree in business or a specific quantitative degree to pursue any of our programs. But we do like to see what you have done previously as it relates to business or math related courses like statistics, calculus, any type of course that's quantitative in nature. We'll take a look at your grades there. And it's also important for us to see the whole scope of your your transcripts. So making sure that all the semesters are in alignment so we can look at trends throughout. So let's say you maybe didn't have the best freshman or first year at university or college, but then you were able to, get a hold of the flow of the coursework and do a little bit better in your second year. So we definitely take account of trends throughout the cycle of your academic history. So those are just some expectations and tips as it relates to essays, and Trista will give us additional insight into some of our essay components.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Daniela. And yes, so moving on to essays, which I know for some folks can be maybe the most anxiety-provoking piece of the application process. But hopefully after today, we're able to provide you with some insight and advice that make the essays feel a little less daunting. So here at Simon, we have two required essays. The first is a statement of your career ambitions. So what is it that you're hoping to do with your degree once you complete it here at Simon? So why are you even interested in pursuing your MBA or MS degree, and where are you going? What are your career goals? We understand that business school is a time for exploration. So we don't necessarily expect that you're coming in knowing the exact company, the exact position and title that you're looking for, months before you even start grad school. But it is generally helpful for you to have a pretty good idea of where you're going after business school and what type of job you're interested in. For a couple of reasons. That's going to give confidence to potential employers that you are interested in the type of work, you had experience in that type of work as well. And we want to know that we're going to be able to give you what you're looking for here at Simon. And so it's helpful for us to know that, okay, if these are your career goals, we can give you what you need to help you get there. And so it's really important that we have a good idea of what you're looking for, because we want to make sure that we ultimately can provide you with what you're looking for to meet your career goals. But we also want to make sure that you feel like Simon could be a good fit for you as well. And so secondly, this other required essay that we have is your contribution to Simon's pledge to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So you may have heard in other webinars and on our marketing materials, in conversation with different people across the Simon community, diversity is incredibly important to Simon. It's something that we take great pride in and value highly. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing individuals into our community who share the same values. And so we're looking for a short essay for you to illustrate the same. And for both of these essays, I always encourage students or applicants to make sure that you have a friend read the essay for a couple of reasons. So first, give them your essays, specifically your statement of career ambitions, and see if they can guess what the prompt is. So don't tell them what you're supposed to be writing about, but see if they can guess what the prompt is. And that will help you to ensure that you've answered the question correctly, which is always really important. And then I also recommend having somebody who maybe doesn't know your story quite as well to go ahead and read your essay too, because that way they're going to be able to point any sort of holes in your story. So by asking somebody who isn't as familiar with sort of your background and your career trajectory and your goals and all of that, with someone who doesn't know your story super well, just to make sure that you're providing enough clarity within it. And then have them check, of course, for spelling and grammatical errors. That is definitely something we pay attention to as well. And so spelling counts. Use your spell check. Use all of the resources that you have available to you to make sure that you are crafting, composing your strongest essay possible. And take some time. This is something that we do expect you do spend a little bit of time on. I know there are several pieces to your application that are already kind of done, right? Daniela just finished talking about your transcript. So school's over. Your grades sort of are what they are, but your essays, that's something that you're working on right now, and you can spend a lot of time on to really show us why you want to be here. So set some time aside for you to craft your essays, and then again for some friends or peers to go ahead and do a review of your essays as well. My top tip is to make sure that when you are writing your essay, you are writing your essay for Simon Business School and not for business school in general. I can't tell you, unfortunately, how many times I have seen another school's name in an essay that I read. It happens all too often, and it looks very messy, very unprofessional, and it's very clear that you've recycled an essay to use for all of the different schools and programs that you're applying to. And so please take the time to make sure that you are addressing the prompt specific to Simon. So those are our 2 required essays. We also have an optional essay, and it is completely optional, just like it sounds. We typically only recommend utilizing the optional essay if there is something in your application that you feel needs additional clarification. So for example, you can see here, maybe like as Daniela mentioned earlier, maybe you did have, a tough first year of college. Maybe you have a gap in your resume. Rather than having the admissions committee make assumptions or craft a story on your behalf, utilize the optional essay to tell us a little bit more about your story. What is that sort of gap in employment on your resume that we see? Or what was going on during your first year of college? We would so much rather you utilize the optional essay to tell us something like that will provide insight into something that might seem like a bit of a red flag in your application, rather than the admissions committee making assumptions, as I said. But with that said, please only use the optional essay if there is something that could add value to your application. So if there is not necessarily anything in your application that you feel needs additional clarification or that would add value to your application, then don't feel like you need to use it. There are plenty of applications that get submitted without the optional essay, and that is more than fine. So hopefully that provides a little bit of clarification on what you can expect from the essay portion of our application. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can actually see a screen grab from our application portal itself. This is part of the essay section. So you can see we're going to upload essay 1, that's your statement of career ambitions, and then essay 2, that is your contribution to Simon's pledge to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then of course that last one is optional, so feel free not to upload anything unless you feel like something needs further clarification. Okay, tips on references. So as I mentioned earlier, Simon's application process is a little bit different from some of the other schools that you might be applying to, and we don't require or accept letters of recommendation. So we'll get the question sometimes, well, I know you don't require letters of recommendation, but where can I submit a letter of recommendation as like a supplementary piece to my application? There is no place on our application for you to upload a letter of recommendation, so no need to plan for that. Instead, we ask you for contact information for 2 references. As you're thinking about who you'd like to utilize as a reference, I encourage you to give this some thought. Think about someone who can speak to your professional strengths. Somebody who has a pretty good understanding of your story. And so if that someone is someone who maybe doesn't have a complete picture of your work history, I encourage you to meet them, take them for coffee, get on the phone with them, have a conversation so you can sort of bring them up to speed on everything that's been going on in your professional life so that they can speak intelligently as well. Make sure they're willing to provide you with a positive reference, which I know sounds so silly, but make sure that if the admissions committee were to reach out to your reference, they are willing to provide a positive reference for you. Definitely very, very important there. And then there are a couple different types of references you're probably all thinking about. So for some of you, you might be considering a professor, especially if you're someone who's still an undergrad. You might be thinking of a professor who could be a reference for you, which is more than fine. But I would encourage at least one of your references to be a professional reference. And so what that could be is a previous employer, your current employer, if you feel comfortable with that and they are aware that you are applying to business school. So definitely only utilize people that you would feel comfortable with the admissions committee reaching out to. And if you are somebody who works for a family business or owns your own business, I would consider even asking a client who works very closely with you, since asking a family member, mom or dad, I'm sure they would have glowing things to say about you, but we'd prefer to hear from a client in that circumstance. So again, be in touch with them. Make sure you're chatting with them so they're very comfortable to have a conversation and speak to your abilities. Think about who you're going to ask in terms of what your relationship was like and their sort of oversight of you. I know sometimes people think that, the bigger the name on your reference list, the better. But if the CEO of the company that you worked for never really spent any time with you or couldn't really speak to specific details of your strengths, then they may not be the best person. I would encourage you to consider maybe a supervisor who worked directly with you or a peer of some kind in that case. So think about who could really speak to your story. And last but not least, the admissions committee will notify you if we do ultimately decide to contact your references. It's not guaranteed, but if they review your application and would like clarifying information on something or would just really like to speak to a reference, we will reach out to you to let you know that we will be contacting your references so that you'll be able to give your references a heads up. And then again, on the right-hand side of the slide there, you can see a quick screen grab from the application itself and what the reference page looks like. Okay, and I'll turn it over to Daniela to talk about English proficiency exams.
Thank you, Trista. So as it relates to English proficiency exams, they are required for all of our international applicants whose native language is not English. We accept at Simon TOEFL, IELTS, and Duolingo. There are, that score requirement there, but likewise, we definitely encourage students to take a look at our class profile online for your respective desired program, and there are score averages there that you can take a look at as well. Let's say that you're an international student, there could be a potential for you to qualify for a waiver for this if you meet both conditions that are noted here on this slide. So if you attended 3 or more academic years of post-secondary education taught solely in English and received a bachelor's or master's degree from a college or university where English was the language of instruction, there is a place in the application where you can denote that and upload proof of that. And then the admissions committee reviews that. And we go from there in regards to that requirement. Yes. And then we'll next talk a little bit about our standardized test scores. For this assessment, we are considered a test optional school. So oftentimes you might see the GMAT, GRE, and even the executive assessment as a requirement of submission for your application. At Simon, we are test optional, so that means it's up to you to submit that. We do take the GMAT, GRE, and executive assessment for our MBA applicants. The executive assessment is solely for MBA applicants. What we assess with that is more of a broad scope of your quantitative capabilities. We are better able to understand your verbal, quantitative, and analytical skill set. We have our published scores through our class profile online that you can reference as well. We encourage candidates to submit if you've already taken the exam that hit that middle 80%. And likewise, it's another data point. As Trista mentioned, once you've submitted your transcripts and you've graduated, that's one of the variables that can't easily be controlled. This is another variable that you can add to your application as another data point for us to analyze and view. And likewise, if you come from a background that is not as quant heavy, then that's an opportunity for us to take a look at your quantitative capability. So that's definitely something to take into consideration. Now we can go on to additional tips on these standardized tests. So as I mentioned previously, submitting your application for that test score is definitely up to you. We publish our class profile on our website, so definitely encourage students to take a look at that. A score does add that other dimension to your application, so we're able to see the competitiveness, from applicant to applicant. And then likewise, further down the line, depending on what you're hoping to pivot to or go into. Some industries may require this score eventually, like investment banking and consulting. So it's something where it's definitely up to you. It is encouraged to prepare. We encourage students to do a test, like a pre-test or do a practice exam or mock exam prior to taking this final test. You can take it as many times as you need. We typically look at your highest scores, but we are also able to track and kind of see how many times you've taken it. So definitely be conscientious and intentional about the times that you take the test. And it can sometimes bolster your overall candidacy for scholarship consideration. And we can delve a little bit more into that, but those are just some general tips as it relates to standardized testing. And then I'll pass it over to Trista to talk a little bit more about video essays.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Daniela. So the video essay component. This is something that looks a little bit different for MBA versus MS candidates. But to give an overview of how the video essay works, upon submission of your application, your video essay link will appear in your applicant status portal. So you actually won't have access to the link and you won't be able to submit your video essay until you submit your application. So this would be something that you're doing after you click submit, after you hit submit. At that time, you'll have the opportunity to test your equipment before actually completing your video essay. Make sure you have a reliable internet connection. So same sort of advice that we would give you in advance of conducting your admissions interview. Make sure that your internet connection is great, your audio equipment is working well, and then you'll receive a single question. You'll then have 30 seconds to think about your response and how you would answer that question. And then you'll have up to 90 seconds to answer the question. You'll have 3 attempts to record your video essay, and each attempt will present a different question. So a total of 3 attempts. Remember that piece. So that's how the video essay works. Big highlights here. The video essay is something that you submit after you submit your application. So that link again appears in your applicant status portal. But this is something that you'll do after you submit your application. Want to test your internet connection and all of your equipment beforehand. You'll get 1 question and you'll have 30 seconds to think about your answer and then up to 90 seconds to answer the question. You'll receive all of these tips and guidance and instructions again in the application itself, but hopefully this at least sort of sets the stage, sets some expectations in terms of what to expect before you head into that piece of the application. For our MBA candidates, this is completely optional. So this provides you with the option to provide us with an additional sort of dimension to your candidacy by providing the video essay. You'll have 24 hours to complete your video essay after submitting your application. So it's a relatively small window. So if you know that the video essay is important to you as an MBA applicant, and you really want to make sure that you do include this as part of your candidacy, make sure that you are completing this within 24 hours of submitting your application. Because if you don't complete your video essay within 24 hours, it will no longer be considered part of your application. You will not be at all penalized in any way, but just know that you have a fairly narrow window to submit your video essay. And so if you don't do that, we're going to go ahead and move on to reviewing your application without. It's optional for MBA candidates. So again, you're not going to be penalized if you choose not to submit it. So totally up to you, but want to at least provide that sort of framework and expectations for our MBA candidates in particular when it comes to the video essay. For MS candidates, this is very different. This is required for all MS applicants because this will ultimately take the place of the admissions interview. So MS candidates, make sure that you are planning to submit your video essay because this takes the place of the admissions interview and it is required for all MS applicants. In terms of the timeline, because this is a required component of your application, your window to submit a completed video essay is a bit bigger. You have 5 days to complete your video essay after submitting your application. If you do not complete your video essay within 5 days of your application submission, your application may be reviewed without this required component. So I strongly advise all MS candidates to make sure that you're completing your video essay sooner rather than later, because again, this is not optional for MS candidates. It takes the place of the admissions interview and it is required for all MS applicants. You do have a bigger window to complete your video essay, but again, it's required. And so I know myself and I like to just get things done so that I don't forget about them. I would encourage you to do the same and submit it sooner rather than later. But again, this is required for all MS applicants and you do have up to 5 days to complete it. All right.
Awesome. And now on to the admissions interview, which might seem a little bit daunting because it has the word interview in it, but rest assured, our goal is to make this an organic conversation at Simon and does require some introspective work on your part. So the way that our interviews work, it is for our MBA only, it is by invitation or during your visit. So we do have some published visit events on our website. If you come to one of those, you could be interviewed during that time. So that is a great opportunity. It's important for you to know that your story, know your why, and be prepared to really talk about your background and some of your accomplishments. Part of our interview process is we are considered a blind interview, so that means that we only have access to your resume. So it really gives you leeway to expand upon some of your achievements, some of your background goals, and things that you have for yourself. And that's part of that introspective work that I mentioned. You should prepare for this like you would for a job interview. So definitely, we love to hear why specifically our school, the why Simon, and delving into that a little bit as well. It is also important to show up professionally dressed for these types of interviews as a recommendation, feeling confident yourself, and that allows the opportunity for organic conversation to flow. And also, we encourage students to ask questions if there's anything that, as you've done your research on our institution, some of our programs, we do welcome that opportunity and leave space to ask questions that are intentional about things that you might be interested in. So, like I mentioned, it's really important to do that background work, be prepared, dress for the interview, and have an open, curious mind when you approach it as well. And now, for our final thing, go ahead, Trista, sorry.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned details about dressing professionally, treating it like a job interview. Because I should have mentioned that for your video essays as well. I would plan to be mindful of your background, just like you would be for an admissions interview, as you're recording your video essay as well. So I'm glad you that jogged my memory. All right. And so from here, we've chatted a lot about different components of the application. And so something that you'll probably hear from a lot of different business schools as you continue to work through the application process is that we use a very holistic approach when we review applications. And so what that means is there's really not one piece of your application that is going to outweigh everything else. And so I'd like to say this specifically because I know we get a lot of candidates who are often really worked up about, a particular test score, for example, in general. And they think that, maybe that one specific test score might be the end all be all for them. And that's really not the case. Every single piece of your application is given equal weight. So everything gets an equal piece of the pie. So we're going to be taking a lot of different things into consideration. So we're looking for students who do have a relatively strong academic background and an academic background that shows us that they are prepared and eager for graduate school. We spend a lot of time working on teams here at Simon, and so we like to see that you have experience working in teams and you've demonstrated the ability to work with others and understand the importance of communication, since that is a huge part of business school as well. We want to make sure that you have a good understanding of why you're pursuing business school and what it is that you want to do after you finish your degree. And then, of course, I mentioned we have such an incredible commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion that we want to make sure that you are equally as committed. And so ultimately looking for well-rounded individuals. We are looking to build a class that is unique. We are very intentional about the candidates that we do admit, because we want everyone to have a really positive experience, and we're not trying to admit a whole class full of people that look exactly the same, because what kind of a fun learning environment would that be? So looking for really well-rounded individuals with a variety of different skill sets, when everything comes together, we're really looking at everything using a holistic approach. So all that to say, there isn't really one piece of your application or one part of your candidacy that is sort of the make it or break it factor of your admissions decision. There is so much that goes into making admissions decisions that there is no specific formula. There's a lot that goes into it. And we're very proud of the very high touch application review process that we do have here at Simon, to make sure that every candidate's application is thoroughly reviewed as we look forward to admitting, a class full of students. And so some sort of housekeeping details we want everybody to be aware of. We have 5 different application deadlines here at Simon, and I think this grid is super helpful. You can actually find our deadlines and decisions grid right on our website as well. But why I enjoy this grid so much is not actually just for the deadlines, but I love that it provides you with the guaranteed date that you can expect a decision by, depending on when you submit your application. The application process is rolling here at Simon. So what that means is you can submit an application at any time. You do not necessarily have to wait for a specific application deadline to submit your application. If you are unable to, meet a specific deadline day, no worries. You don't have to feel like you need to wait until the next deadline to come around. Feel free to submit in between as we are rolling. So I think this is a super, super helpful page. And like I said, not only is it right here in this webinar, but you can find it on our website as well. And so thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. We hope that we've provided a really thorough understanding and breakdown of the application process. I'm hopeful that we were able to sort of answer a lot of questions about the different pieces of the application. Should you have further questions, our website is an excellent resource. So you can see our website right there on the screen. The admissions FAQ page is super helpful. So if you go to the admissions portion of whatever program you're looking at here at Simon, you'll see the FAQ section there. Super, super helpful. You can stay in touch with us via social media. We're on all kinds of different platforms. But we wish you all the best of luck in your process and look forward to reviewing your application soon.